Welcome everyone, you're listening to Nephology, the podcast dedicated to crypto, accounting, business, finance and much, much more. I'm Joe David, the founder of Nephos Group and Miner. Please note that all conversations recorded are professional opinions, and if you'd like to know more or gain support, please reach out to the team directly. Now on to the next episode. So welcome everyone to the latest episode of the Nephos Group podcast. I'm delighted to be joined by Susie today. Hello Susie, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. So thanks for joining us, Susie. Do you want to give the viewers a bit of a background on you and what you're doing here today?
So my name's Susie, and my background is that I started off as an accountant and yeah, exactly, and then became a financial analyst. But got very disappointed with the world that I was working in, and felt like I didn't want to put my energy into that system anymore, and I wanted to put my energy into something that was more positive.
And that's when Bitcoin.
That's when I found Bitcoin.
Why don't we break it down very simply then into why did you move from the traditional finance system into this new world of Bitcoin, and when?
So it was a process. I think it started because somebody at work laughed at one of my colleagues because they bought some Bitcoin.
And when was this?
This would
Roughly?
This would be in 2020.
Okay.
It was a very small amount, and I was thinking, crikey, like, why? Why are you laughing at him? And it I didn't do anything then, but it stayed in my brain. It kind of fused in my brain because of the mocking.
Yeah.
And
at this point, were you indoctrinated still in the current financial system and how?
Very much so.
Okay.
I had absolutely no idea. In fact, I was probably one of those people that thought that Bitcoin had no value.
Yeah. Okay.
But this piqued my interest, and so later on, I was reading various articles, and I came across an article on Doge, and I thought, oh, I wonder how you buy Doge.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to understand that process. So I had to buy some Bitcoin to buy some Doge.
Okay.
On Exodus.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I did. And so I then bought some Doge, and I told my husband, and I said, do you know what I did today? I bought some Bitcoin. And then we went out for some drinks with some friends, and I was just really excited by it, and because it was so new, it was something different, it was a new money, it was a new way of buying it, and I was really chuffed that I managed to figure it out as well. And so I said to my friends, oh look, I bought some Bitcoin today, and one of the guys just said, why? That was the second time. Yeah. Why? It was such a powerful word, and I don't know why, but it really struck me. I thought, why? Oh, because it's interesting. It's a new type of finance. Why not? Why wouldn't you be curious about this? And so from there, the reading and the learning just continued.
So this was during 2020? So
I think I started reading about it. Yeah, I think my first purchase was 2020, and that's when but it wasn't serious. It was in the background. I was still going to work, and I think it really ramped up in 2021.
Okay, so by ramping up, so you started doing some research into it. And interestingly, by the way, my journey with crypto and Bitcoin is a similar time frame. I got introduced to it slightly earlier through a client that we were working with, but it wasn't really part of my brain at that point. And then 2020 was when I started researching it a bit more. And then 2021 is when it really exploded. So interesting, we're on the same kind of time journey there. So you start looking into it. Like you say, these things happen where people laugh at it, or they question why you would even consider it, all those things. So then the learning journey starts. So then what happens then in this transitional period? How do you... What starts to happen in your brain, if you like, between the traditional world that you used to and this new Bitcoin world?
So... on this journey, I thought Bitcoin was for boomers. I thought it was an old coin that had had its day. I didn't know anywhere near as much about it as I do now. And I was more of a... Can I say the word? Shit coiner?
Yeah. You can say whatever you want. The joys of this podcast is you can say whatever you want.
Okay. I wasn't sure if it would be offensive though to shitcoiners.
Yeah, well, probably. I mean, we could just say hello and we probably offend someone. So, yeah. But anyway, sorry. So shitcoiners, yes.
So I started looking into that, and I started thinking, oh, Ethereum is quite interesting. And then I was following the merge, and that happened later. And then I thought, oh, why move from proof of work to proof of stake, and all those unanswered questions. And I was interested in all the different types of projects that were available.
Yep.
And I wanted to know what the differences were, why some were successful, why 99.9% of crypto is a scam, what's good, what's not, how do you find out? And it was just, the learning was immense.
And how did you learn? What mediums were you using to learn on?
YouTube mostly. Yeah. I think
same for me.
YouTube's incredible because you can listen to YouTube wherever you are on the school run. There's no, you can feel, sometimes I'm even walking around the house with a cardigan on and my phone in my pocket and doing washing up, just listening to podcasts.
Yeah. So YouTube, podcasts, all those things where you get to hear real people talk about real life situations rather than what you're fed, I guess, from the mainstream. So you're going on this journey, you're listening to YouTube and all those bits and pieces. And at what point then, and what was it that made you really, I'm sure it was a journey like it was for me, but at what point did you go, do you know what, the traditional financial world isn't for me, this new world is where I want to be?
I don't think there was just one moment.
Okay.
I think you have many.
Yep. You
have many where a penny drops and you think, oh yeah, no, I really get that now.
Yeah.
It just happens, and the more pennies that drop,
it's like compounding, if you like, over time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I just felt that the further I went, the more I was leaving behind my old thinking, and actually the people that I used to hang out with as well.
Right.
Because it creates a divide. All of a sudden, you can see everything differently and more clearly, and you want to explain it to people, and they don't see it the same way. Because it is a journey.
Absolutely. And so while you're on this journey, are you still working in kind of traditional finance?
I was up until March 2022.
Okay. So while you're in this world, are you a traditional finance world and you're learning more about Bitcoin? Are you trying to talk to people at work, or are you just kind of like, I know they're not going to bother listening to me? So
I did try, but I didn't try very hard. And I don't think I had the same level of conviction then. Although I did believe in it and I was talking about it, but the level of conviction just wasn't there.
Yeah, okay. So now if you were in that job now, you would be talking about it.
I don't know if I'd bother. I think I'd put out the feelers to see who's open to it, but I generally don't talk to people about it unless I feel like they are open.
Yeah, okay, because you just can't be bothered with the arguments type thing.
And they're not interested.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually, this is kind of off topic, but I was watching a TikTok or something the other day, and this guy was going around American people and asking them about Trump, and he was saying about white supremacy or something like that, and he basically, this guy who was asking these people had on his phone 20 different videos showing times when Trump was was like kind of like condemning, if you like, white supremacy and things like that, and not kind of going, you need, what people believe him to be a white supremacist and all those sorts of things. And he would talk to people initially, and he'd say, so what do you think about Trump and white supremacy, blah, 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 and they'd talk about it, and they'd be really engaged in talking about the negative. And as soon as he said, I've got 20 kind of clips here of when he hasn't been, do you want to listen to those? They just walked off because they weren't interested in the truth. And I think that's, for me as well, is similar to Bitcoin and crypto. I'm not as much of a Bitcoin maxi as you are. I'm more about the whole kind of crypto ecosystem. But I think people are very interested when you're peddling there and pushing their agenda. But as soon as you want to flip that agenda to something that challenges their thinking, they don't want to listen, if that makes sense. And that's why, like I said, that was off topic, but I think it's true of, it was true of that kind of guy going around talking to people about Trump, and I think it's true for you going around and talking about Bitcoin, because if they're not interested, they just won't even engage with you.
And if they've read a lot of the lazy journalism that's been in the mainstream
Yeah,
media,
yeah.
then they'll just think that it's a Ponzi scheme that
Yeah,
boils
yeah,
the
yeah.
oceans.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said Bitcoin and crypto, because I think that that's a really important distinction to make.
Yeah, and we'll come on to that. So, okay, so we're going on this journey. And then you made this decision to leave your job.
Yes.
And this decision to leave your job, what was that? If you can say, it might be personal, but what drove that decision? Was it this whole I can't work in this world anymore?
Well, no, that was a journey and a process in itself. So the system that I was working on was becoming obsolete, and I was reluctant to retrain because I just didn't have the energy or the motivation to put into that type of role. So I was begging my boss to make me redundant, because when I had my first baby in 2010, I used to run the team that I worked on, but I had a baby and had to take it to motion.
Okay.
So to go part-time.
Yeah.
So when that happened, my career just went downhill.
Right. Okay.
And so I just didn't have the energy for it.
And the
anymore.
system didn't allow you, but the system didn't. If it was in a system where you were motivated, you would have found a way to.
I would have.
But in this case, it didn't. So you left your work, and then what was the?
Although they did let me down because I was just a part-time person, and I think it was not just a combination of not being motivated. I think it was a lack of interest in my career that my company had.
Okay.
Because I was just there to tick a few boxes.
Right.
So it was a combination of factors. I think if they had invested in me,
maybe it would have been different.
It would have been different. But then that's good for me because it gave me the push that I needed.
I was just going to say that. So because you would have stayed in an industry that probably you didn't believe in.
Yes.
Instead of being given the opportunity, in a sense, to start going back deeper into this world. So you've left your job now. We're in 2022 at the start, and now I guess your Bitcoin interest ramps up even further because you've got the time, in a sense, and the brain capacity to look into it. So then what happened? Because now you do quite a lot of stuff. So we're going on that journey. So then what happened?
I just started writing.
Okay.
I
like, are you on your own?
On my
for your own blog?
Just to get it down, just because it was bubbling up.
Did you publish it?
Only on Substack.
Okay.
So it was the only way that I could process what was bubbling through my brain constantly, all the thinking, the musing, and I just had to write it. So the one of the first articles that I wrote was about centralization versus decentralization.
Okay, yeah.
So it wasn't even about
like Bitcoin specifically.
Not really, no. And one of the things that I wrote in there, it was round about the time that Trump had been deplatformed from Twitter.
Yeah.
And God, he gets mentioned again. I'm definitely not a Trump fan. I'm not a fan of any of them. I think they're all equally awful.
Yeah.
But I did say if Twitter can deplatform the president of the United States of America, who really holds the power? And then the Twitter files came out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just knew it. I knew that people were being manipulated, and I knew that they had far too much control over what people could see and read.
So the first kind of thing for you was moving from a centralized world to a decentralized world, and understanding the benefits of not being controlled by everything else that's around us, what we see on the tube or the train, or we're all directed in it. And I am very much I'm a non-conforming, not anti-government, but anti-establishment, anti-kind of, I do believe in a good solid government. I'm not saying that our government is good or solid, but I do believe that a fundamental for the majority of the world at the moment, a solid government is what they need. But I'm also, so I'm not into this whole propaganda thing of like, the whole world's going to end type thing. But I am very much into our minds are controlled by the media that we see, and to quote someone like Andrew Tate, this whole matrix
God, we're bringing up all the nasty
all the fun
stuff.
people, and I said this to my wife. I was like, you don't necessarily have to agree with every word that comes out of Andrew Tate's mouth, and it's the same way you don't have to agree with every word that comes out of Rishi Sunak's mouth, for example. I said to you earlier that I don't think we were recording, but he talked about inflation yesterday and how that's such a problematic thing right now, and I agree with that. it is a problem. Now, how they deal with it is a different matter.
I think they're definitely not doing it in the right
And
way.
and I totally agree. But I think, so what I'm trying to say is, one of the things that, Andrew Tate does talk about is this message of control and coercion and this psyop thing that he talks about. But it is true, and there's this clip, I don't know if you've seen it, where there's like 20 or 30 like news broadcasters, and they're all broadcasting the same message, same words, same thing, and it's quite scary when you think of it like that. So anyway, I've taken us off topic here. So
well, no, actually, very much. I mean, why do you think CBDCs haven't been in the mainstream media? This should be discussed ad nauseum, like we did Brexit.
Or it is discussed in the mainstream media, but not in a. If you hear it in the mainstream media, you never hear the negative side. You only ever hear.
I haven't even heard the positive. I haven't heard it discussed at all.
Yeah.
When I speak to most people and I say, "Do you know what programmable money is?"
They've got no idea.
They haven't got a clue.
So okay, so let's get onto that then in a second. So you started writing. You're on Substack, just writing down your thoughts for kind of your own benefit, if you like. And then I guess the more you write, the more you learn. The more you learn, the more people you speak to, and then eventually you get to the point where you are talking about it more widely. So now you write a column with CityAM.
Yes.
And what's that about specifically?
It's called My Two Sats, and it is about Bitcoin, but I do write about CBDCs as well.
Okay.
Because I think that it's part and parcel. I think that Bitcoin needs to stay there to keep CBDCs honest.
Okay.
So people have an alternative.
Great. And I've also seen you on things like GB News and things like that. So do you feel your message is starting to get out there?
I don't know. It's difficult because when you write something or you do something, it just goes out onto the internet and you just don't know. But slowly, I mean, these things can't happen quickly.
No.
And the fact that I have an opportunity to write into a London business paper where people are going to be, who work in the city, who are very much in traditional finance, will be able to see that there is an alternative. And
do you have free reign on that article to an extent?
So far, they've published everything that I've written.
And that says a lot about the article, the paper itself and the...
My editor is amazing. Incredible. Even if he doesn't necessarily agree with everything that I'm writing, he will still publish it.
And that is free speech.
Yeah.
It's simple in its simplest format. That is what free speech is. You being able to give your opinion. And I said to you, probably on the way we were walking downstairs to the room, you don't have to agree with every word that everybody says, but you do have to give them the opportunity to speak, in my opinion. And you're being given that opportunity with that particular publication. Have you tried to reach out to any more mainstream? GB News like to be a little bit more controversial, I guess, in their approach. Have you tried to reach out to anyone more mainstream to try and get any wider coverage, or have you just thought there's no point because they won't listen to me?
I'm not sure they're ready.
Yeah.
And you've got to look at who they're funded by and who controls their narrative, because their narratives are controlled.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Sky are a conglomerate owned, by whoever they're owned by these days, but effectively by private money, effectively, and they are a commercial business that have to make commercial money. And like you say, why would they destroy their own narrative in a sense by having someone like you?
There was a time when journalists looked to uncover the truth. Yeah. That was the job of
investigative
a journalist.
journalism. Yeah.
But now it feels like they just act as a barrier between the public and the government.
Yeah, it's interesting that, isn't it? Because like you say, journalism used to be, a real good journalism used to be, and I watched, not that it, and again, it was a Netflix documentary, but I watched the Bernie Madoff documentary that Netflix put together, and the Wall Street Journal, I think it was, that kind of uncovered, in a sense, and there's one guy, and obviously this is a drama, so forgive me, but there's one guy in the Wall Street Journal that was really pushing to get stories out there about what he was doing and how he was doing it and blah, blah, blah. And his superiors basically said no, because it didn't push the agenda that the Wall Street Journal wanted to push, because Bernie Madoff was this golden man in New York that nobody could touch. So why would the Wall Street Journal want to touch somebody that was seen as a golden child?
Yeah.
That sums it up. I'm sure there are people within organizations that that do want to talk about these things or do want to do
Probably all the
real
people
journalism.
that work at GB News.
Yeah.
They would have come from mainstream media outlets.
Yeah.
And have been told what they can and can't say.
Yeah. And now they're moving on to a platform where they're a little bit more free. So we've talked about that. So now kind of fully fledged Bitcoiner as it were. But are you still in the real world? The real world, that's the wrong phrase, so I shouldn't say that. Are you still in the traditional world? Do you still pay bills with traditional money? And
of course, you've got no choice.
Yeah.
But I would rather put my energy into the change that I want to see.
Would you hold much fiat cash?
Well, yeah, because it's essential, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I still have a mortgage,
Yeah.
and I have to pay that. There's no alternative way to pay that mortgage.
But if you had surplus, if say for example, I'm making this up, your monthly expenses were £3,000 and you had £10,000 coming in every month, for example.
No, I think it's good to diversify and make sure that you've got enough cash on hand.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So let's move on then to CBDC. So as you have pointed out, they're definitely something that are going to cause some pain for some people. But let's talk. As you said, a lot of people don't even know what CBDC is. So before we go into it, in your words, what is a CBDC?
It stands for Central Bank Digital Currency, and it's money that will be issued by a country's central bank through a third-party provider, a PIP, a payment interface provider, and it will be money that can be programmed. The fines can be directly taken out of your bank account. They can take tax directly, or your wallet. I think it will be. It will expire. So if they want to push certain areas of the economy and stimulate certain areas, then they can give you some money and say, right, you have to spend it at this place by this time, so they can and that's just a large level of interference that we just do not need.
So for those people that say, well, how's that any different to I know some of the points you've just raised are, but for those people that say, how's that different to my bank account at the moment? My bank account is digital money. My bank account is effectively, although it's private, it's not in the grand scheme of things. If the government put a court order in place to say Santander to provide bank statements and all that sort of stuff, they could do. Whereas if it was a Bitcoin wallet, they couldn't. So why when people say that, what's the difference between the two? What do you reckon the kind of key things that you think are the differences?
Well, they can't directly take tax out of your account now, and they can't take your congestion charge. A fine.
What about those people that say, well, that's great if they take those things and I don't have to worry about doing it?
If you want to hand over absolutely everything to the government and have zero control and basically outsource your life and your thinking, then that's great. It will also be frictionless. So at the moment, we've got levels of friction that prevent these things from happening. But this would just be seamless. And so do you remember when they said that we should all be driving diesel cars?
Yeah.
And then very shortly after they said, oh, no, don't drive diesel cars, they're bad.
Yeah.
That's the type of government agenda that could get pushed through programmable money.
By basically saying that we'll limit the amount you can spend, for example, on diesel because we want you to use electric cars.
Yes.
So there's going to be a lot of people that are going to listen to this sort of conversation and say, what you're talking about is this kind of propaganda-y, anti-government, anti-establishment, all those bits and pieces, right-wing, all those
I'm
words.
a lefty.
All those words that will be that's interesting. But all those things that will be thrown at you, right? Because these sorts of anti-government-y type, they are more right-wing than left-wing. Typically, these challenging.
I'm a huge hippie. I drive around in the camper van. No, honestly, I'm a lefty libertarian hippie that drives everywhere in a VW camper van. I'm not that stereotype at all.
So when people not look at you, but as in when they listen to this or they're watching this, and they're saying those things about you. Obviously, you can say, I'm this, I'm that, and the other. But what's your kind of, I guess, point back to them around when they say stop with this propaganda? You're being too far. It's not going to happen. They're never going to do it. What's your message to that? Like, where do you, apart from your word, what?
Apart from the fact that it's all written down and it's fact.
Where?
The Bank of England have got a consultation paper and a technical document that details exactly this.
So in that, they talk about privacy.
They do talk about privacy.
And they've said...
They also talk about inclusion, except the document itself isn't very inclusive, because when I ran it through the Hemingway app, it said that 45% of the sentences were either hard to understand or very hard to understand. The reading age came out at 15 to 16 years old, but the average reading age in the UK is 9.
Right. I didn't know that.
So if you're talking about being inclusive, then you have to, and changing money at the same time, then you have to write a document that most people can read and understand, like they do in the NHS.
And so, I mean, that was my next word, is, this is a complicated subject. Is it possible to write it so simply that a 9-year-old...
I think they could have definitely done better.
And, okay, so we're talking about this privacy point. So the government say it's going to be private, and they're going to say it's not. Their answer to you will be it's not going to be programmable.
It says programmable in the technical documentation.
But they will push the narrative that all these things are positive, right? That it simplifies life. And I'm just trying to get to the...
Yeah.
I'm with you. I'm anti CBDC myself. We've talked about this before, and Jamie and I did a Twitter Spaces, and you came on that, and voiced your opinion on that, which was great. But I'm totally anti CBDC. There's one benefit that I can see, and this is a loose benefit, and but more for me is that is getting people used to a new way of wallets and things like that, where if they're using wallets, we can then all of a sudden go, right, now you're using that wallet, it's really simple to use this wallet, right? That's the only thing for me that I can see that will add value. So I am playing the game a little bit here, but I also think that we should get I think you should listen to both sides. If you're right wing and you only read and watch right wing stuff, you can never understand what it's like from the other side, the other point of view. So I'm very much like, you need to listen to both sides to form your own opinion. And whether you are right or wrong is questionable, but if you've got both sides of the opinion, you can make an informed decision. So, for people, that's what I'm trying to get at here is, the government will push this. What I find interesting though, right? And sorry, I'm chatting on. You're supposed to be the guest on my podcast, but I'm chatting on here. You look at something like COVID, right? Now, I was very anti the control, all those different narratives. That 1 minute they push one narrative, the next, 1 minute masks were terrible.
Didn't make sense either.
The next minute masks are fine. Yeah. But you had to wear a mask in some circumstances, but you didn't in others, and it just made no sense, right? Yeah. Anyway. But what I found interesting was it wasn't a lot of the time you can go, our government have said this and that's terrible, or that government have said this and that's terrible. But with COVID and with CBDCs, they're all peddling the same message, which you don't always get. Sometimes you go, well, let's go to this country because they talk differently. But actually, pretty much all governments are on the CBDC train.
They are, but the uptake hasn't been very good.
Okay.
So in China, they are in the final phase of their pilot.
Yep.
And there's one city in China, I can't remember the name, where they're going to make sure that all civil servants are paid using their CBDC.
Right.
Because the uptake has been so low, they're actually having to force it. And the same in Nigeria. I think it's only been about 3% uptake.
So even when they push this really positive agenda of how this CBDC...
And in China as well.
People don't buy it.
No. But that's why podcasts like this are so important, because you won't get this information from the mainstream media.
And that's the point is, like I said to you before, it's not about pushing a negative narrative or anything like that, or even a positive narrative. It's about pushing a narrative that somebody to listen to be able to listen to this and make their own judgment. And if they want to make a judgment, as we just said, to have all their money controlled and programmed by the government, it's not for us to stop them to do that. But if we don't give them the information, and we talked about Brexit, I think that might have been before we kind of came on air. And that, I don't know how you feel about Brexit, but I feel that whatever the decision was, it had to be an informed decision that the public could make. And in my opinion, They didn't have anywhere near the amount of information or opportunities to listen to things like this to make that decision.
But they still discussed both sides, though.
They did.
The information, I think, was a little bit ropey.
Yeah.
Definitely.
On both sides.
But it was discussed, and both sides got their say.
And do you think both sides got a fair crack at the whip?
I think there was also a lot of misinformation in those campaigns as well.
That's the issue, isn't it?
Yeah.
Even if you give both sides a crack of the whip, how do you verify what they're talking? And I, like I say, I'm not going to say whether I was pro or against or anything like that.
I've actually changed my mind.
Have you? Yeah. I don't know if I have or not, to be honest.
Do you think that people should have got the vote?
Personally, no.
No, I don't. Because it's too detailed. We can't possibly
And that's
know
my point.
And
like, how much can you really research about it factually? You're not going to go and sit in the European government and chat to every member of parliament and understand their thoughts and, interview them all and, and then make a decision, are you?
No. And it's a very...
It was such a fundamental thing for this country. And if I'm totally honest, David Cameron gambled on it.
Yeah.
And effectively for his career lost, but gambled on it thinking that it was this great thing that he was going to win by a landslide, and effectively he gambled his kind of career, if you like, political career.
Isn't that why we're in this trouble? Because they're all playing games. I mean, how many of them are genuine? You've got to go into politics, and you've not only got to help your constituents, but you've also got to play all these little mind games that they do. And when you look at the cabinet, they've all... You get backbenchers that have been there for 30 years that are probably as honest as the day is long, that don't progress. But then you get these other guys that seem to go up the ranks, and it's not honest.
Yeah, no, I get that. And you do hear sometimes if you get to listen, and this is the other thing, how many people, and I'm not saying they necessarily should, well, they probably should, but, when people don't listen to the debates, right? So, and I listen to some, when there's subjects that I'm very much interested in, I'll listen to some of them, like the actual debates when you've got, backbenchers there, not, Rishi Sunak doesn't even turn up, Keir Starmer doesn't turn up. It's the kind of real kind of crux of it. And when you listen to some of them, like you say, they talk a lot of sense, and they, and some of these when these backbenchers were pushing the government during the COVID period, again, who's to say what's right or wrong on the intervention that they took? But at the end of the day, we didn't really get a fair opinion. We just got one message that was delivered. Yeah. And I think that's the challenge, and that's what we're trying to do here is give that other side. So, okay, so let's get back onto the point. So CBDCs, so programmable money, not private at all in reality. No. And from our perspective, or from my perspective anyway, I won't talk for you, the one benefit is that it introduces people to kind of a new financial system in terms of wallets and how to manage your own custody of funds and things like that. So what else is your message around CBDCs?
It's difficult because I'd like to ask people to go out and do their own research.
How?
But it's very difficult to understand. So I would use the Bank of England website, go and read the consultation paper. Read the...
We'll link that in the description.
Yeah, and the consultation got extended until the 30th of June, so I don't know when this goes out, but...
Yeah, it won't go out before the 30th of June, so that's in a few days' time.
Yeah, okay, no.
But still, read the paper.
Yeah, read the paper and just try and see both sides, and also look into Bitcoin as a solution. So that's what I was going to say. So it's all very well then reading the so they might read the consultation and similarly to you and to myself, you read it and you'll go, I'm not in for this. This is not. And then they just go back to traditional money, if you like, or traditional do you know what I mean? Kind of fiat money. So that's what I was then going to get to. Is so then so they don't like CBDCs, so they fall back. So how do we? I say push them. That's not the right word. How do we guide them to researching things like Bitcoin and stuff like that? Where would be the first? If you know nothing about Bitcoin, where would you start? That in itself is a journey. Is that I don't think there is any start point really. Just podcasts. I mean, if you do have show notes, you could maybe recommend a couple of your own. I mean, what Bitcoin did is excellent. I've watched nearly all of those videos. They're
Peter
fantastic.
McCormack, is it?
Yeah. And he touches on loads of different aspects, because you think, oh, Bitcoin, it's just money, but there's so many. So there's an environmental aspect.
Yeah.
There's a philosophical, humanitarian. It's endless, the discussions and all the different things that have grown from Bitcoin. It's phenomenal.
Okay, so that's a good one. Yeah, we'll link some more. Okay, so and on the humanitarian piece, I know that Ukraine did quite a large appeal for. Did they take Bitcoin, or was it a different crypto that they took?
I think they might have taken Bitcoin.
They probably weren't so fussy on what they took, but even let's just take crypto in general for a second. You know, the opportunity to speed that process, to make it easier for people, make it easier for for other countries or for aid agencies and that to receive these funds in a much easier way. That's like you say, that's one piece in itself. So I think for me, the biggest, if I could hold my whole life in Bitcoin, I would. And I've actually gone on a kind of an up and a down journey, in a sense of Bitcoin was obviously the entry point for me, because it's the entry point for most people into crypto, or maybe less so now because there's a wider entry points, but for me it was there. Then I kind of went away from Bitcoin, but I thought, well, Bitcoin's only got one thing. It can only do one thing, and therefore it's limited in its thinking. Therefore, I'm going to go on to all these other things and see about all these other things. And then I've actually come back down the slope and I'm back on the, there's a few more I quite like, but in the main, I'm Bitcoin as a, that's for me is the gold standard, as it were. So I would absolutely hold as much as I could in Bitcoin where I could. But how do we start transitioning? And I know that's, again, you're going to say it's a hard question to answer, but we can't just, it's a bit like saying, I hate the government, but I'm not going to vote. Because then you can kind of go, well, I can't really complain about something that I'm not trying to influence. Even if my decision is only a tiny little decision, I've taken my stand. So if I vote for, I don't know, the Green Party, for example, because that's what I believe in, even though I know that the Green Party are never going to get into government, I've done my bit. I've taken my stand. So we can sit here and say we would do this, we would do that. How? I
know. Yeah, I can. This is an easy one to answer, actually. I would download a wallet of Satoshi, go to your local Bitcoin meetup, find out where it is, find places that, when on the wallet of Satoshi, you can actually look up places where you can use it. I've gone out of my way to go and buy a cup of coffee in London because I knew that I could pay for it on Lightning.
Okay, yeah.
So at every opportunity, I had to get my car fixed and convinced the mechanic that I should pay him part in Bitcoin.
And he accepted that?
A little bit. Not the whole
but it's a starting point. But it's a starting point.
My window cleaner.
Yeah.
Any business
really cool.
that is an owner-occupier business where they have control over there. So any opportunity, my local refill shop, I love it.
Yeah.
I've been going there since March 2020 when the pandemic, they opened up just before the pandemic hit. But as soon as I went in there after the management was taken over, I was like, when are you going to take Bitcoin? Here's a Bridge to Bitcoin leaflet. And so every time I go in there, you taking it yet? You taking it yet? So all these little businesses that have that kind of control. And the other day, we went out for breakfast, and at the end of it, we paid the bill and we said, do you want a tip? If you do, you've got to download the wallet of Satoshi.
So that's interesting. So I was going to my next question was going to be, how have your family taken to the, because it's all sometimes like my wife kind of, I'm not saying she doesn't care. She's definitely cares because I care, but she doesn't get it as much, right? Because she's not as passionate, and she doesn't get why I get so frustrated about all these things and whatnot. How have your family taken to the? So
my husband is just as much of a Bitcoiner as I am,
Great.
Which is amazing. So
did that happen after? Like, were you on the journey, you got to a point and then he followed, or
no,
not followed, that's not the right word, but
it happened at the same time. We just started exchanging ideas. I think it happened when I said, oh, do you know what I did today? I bought some Bitcoin. And he went, did you? And he was instantly curious. He didn't dismiss it or roll his eyes or think that I was crazy. He asked me questions. How did you do that? And then after that, we just started discussing it, and I remember he dropped me off at a hospital appointment and went to wait in the car park, and when I came back out, he was trying to work out how the crypto.com worked. I was like, oh, what are you doing? And so then he just went off on his own little journey, and then he started swapping ideas, and now he recommends podcasts and vice versa. And so if I didn't have him to bounce off, it would be a very lonely journey.
Yeah. And you said you've got, well, you mentioned one child specifically, but judging by the fact you said 2010, they're 13, I guess.
Yeah, so my daughter's 12 and my son has just turned 10.
Okay, so do they have any idea what you're talking about?
So Elsie has started asking questions.
Yep.
She's very good at asking questions, and she's really good at asking awkward questions that I have to really think about how to ask.
Yeah, kids are good at that.
Them. Yeah, they do, don't they? But it's great, though. I really like and respect it. Henry actually went and did a Bitcoin presentation at school.
Oh, wow.
Where he told them that there was only 21 million. Andrew Tate's got all of those.
I heard that on Sky News the other day. Lucky man. Although
it's pretty worthless if you hold all of them. I mean, it's not really an economy.
I was just going to say that. It kind of takes away the whole point of the decentralized system if one person owns every single one. But anyway.
Well, that was funny.
But that shows, right, how uneducated.
It shows how early.
Well, yeah.
I mean, I know it seems like such a cliche line, but we are so early.
Yeah. You forget that. You definitely forget that when you're in the space. When you're talking about it day in, day out, you definitely forget how early you are.
So he did a presentation at school, and he told everybody about the features of Bitcoin, the environmental benefits, and
and the school were open to that, and
they were. I was really surprised, actually. I was worried that they wouldn't, but they accepted it. And one of his little mates said, "I prefer Doge." I was just like, did your dad tell you to say that?
Yeah, Dad told you to be difficult.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean that's great that your family are on the. My children are still too young to. My 7-year-old just hates everything I like. I'm a Man United fan, and he supports Chelsea because I'm a Man United fan. If I like crypto, he hates it. So we're at that stage at the moment where we're battling through. Little does he know that he better like it, because that's where his future is going to lie. Because that's where I'm putting away his trust fund, in inverted commas, is into Bitcoin and things like that. So hopefully by the time he gets to 18, he'll like it.
He'll get it way before that. Yeah. Bitcoin's inevitable.
Yeah.
And I think with everything that's I mean, it's game theory at play, isn't it? When you look at the BlackRock ETF and you look at, within 7 days, how many institutions came out and said that do you think that's orchestrated? It's got to be, hasn't it?
I mean, yeah, you can't. It does feel like, but for me, the BlackRock thing is not the most important, but the BlackRock thing for me is one of the most important things, because, Grayscale doing what they did was okay. It is what it is. Even things like Tesla, Elon Musk has always been a maverick. Even Michael Saylor, you wouldn't exactly call him a normal kind of, not normal is the wrong word, but you wouldn't kind of a traditional, that's the better word, traditional CEO, right, of a corporate company. For me, BlackRock are the first one that have really, as a traditional firm, that ETF for me is one of the biggest steps for a traditional institution, I think.
But the chain of events leading up to it were interesting, weren't they? When you think, with Gary Gensler being difficult about what's a security and what's a commodity, Coinbase and Binance saying that we've been reaching out to you relentlessly, trying to understand what we need to do to make you guys happy, and they pretend to have open arms and then sue them. Yeah. And then as soon as that happens, BlackRock release their ETF, another kind of 6 institutions come out and say, oh, okay, we're on board with this too. Then I think what will happen is, because I actually think that the raising of the interest rates, we were talking about Sunak and how they have to, which I think is absolutely
let's touch on that for a second. So we were talking about that before we came on air, so go through what you were talking to me about. So
raising interest rates to crush demand essentially means we want to ruin people's lives so that they can't spend any money. I mean, it's a horrific way of dealing with bad monetary policies that have been created by our government.
So on that point, though, because obviously we're in traditional finance, I guess you do understand why that theory is.
I do.
And as a theory as a solving a problem, it does solve a problem.
I think that if you, I mean, this is a little bit out there, but if you increased VAT, if you want to crush demand, then crush demand on luxury items, increase VAT, and then that way people don't get affected by the fact that their lives are going to be ruined. Then they have a choice. There's no silver bullet or perfect solution.
No.
I'm just trying
better
to think
monetary
of
policy in the first place would be.
And then they sit there and blame it on all sorts of things like Brexit, rather than the fact that we had excessive money printing during COVID and people sat at home not being useful but receiving lots of money and spending.
And this is where my right-wing nature will come out, and I'm not right-wing, but like where I will then come out and say, well, you were happy as a country to receive it when it was given to you and sit on your ass and do nothing when you were being furloughed. Now all of a sudden you've got to pay for it. You're not very happy about it.
But they were forced into being furloughed. I mean,
they're forced into being furloughed in a sense of. I actually heard yesterday that somebody, it might have been on Newsnight or something like that, but there was an opinion poll type guy, and he was going out and talking to all these people, and they were saying the biggest thing that Sunak is praised and loved for is furlough. Right now, I understand what you're saying, that they were forced into it, which they were as individuals, which they were by the government shutting everything down and COVID being what COVID was. But my point is, nobody really, well, I say nobody, not many people stood up at that point and said, hang on a second, do you realise what this is going to do?
Would it have made any difference?
I'm not saying it would have, but my point is there'll be a lot of people now that will sit there and say, interest rates are killing me, but they were quite happy to sit on their ass and do nothing.
But they had no choice.
They could have done something.
If you're being told as a business owner that you can't work, I mean, think about that. You have a business and you're being told you cannot work.
I agree with you, but that was only for, I say that was only for, and I'm now defending something that I never defended at the time. But my point is, as a business, so for example, I was working with a coffee shop during COVID, so they shut down. Obviously, had to shut down. So they because then they allowed takeaways, didn't they? So they just did takeaways. Now, it wasn't perfect, but it was something. So they had a couple of member of staff, obviously, that they furloughed, and then they had a couple of member of staff that they brought in to do the takeaway thing. Or
the ingenuity was amazing.
Yeah, or I know people that were furloughed but went and worked in Tesco's to stack shelves to earn a bit of cash. Or, like, my point is, yes, we can say that they had no choice, and don't get me wrong, if everyone had gone to work in Tesco's, it wouldn't have been possible and all that sort of stuff. But there are things that people could have done, not business owners specifically. I'm more talking about employees, especially for organisations like service organisations that took the opportunity to furlough people when, and those people then just literally sat on their ass and did nothing. That's the thing I'm talking about, is whether they were forced to or not, we are now complaining about something that at the time we were quite happy to receive.
But the government aren't even acknowledging the fact that it's as a result of that. They're saying that inflation is as a result of Brexit.
Yeah.
Which isn't true.
No.
I mean, obviously, energy prices going up and causing food inflation, that is part of it.
Yeah, and like anything, it's not, Brexit isn't the sole thing, or COVID isn't the sole thing, all of these things, but Brexit happening at the same time of COVID didn't help matters.
I do think flooding the economy with money that you can create out of thin air when nobody's being productive.
And that's the biggest problem, because what furlough ended up doing really was it propped people up for a while. And then in the end, people were either kept on, which was limited in some cases that I saw, because so many businesses pivoted, or so many businesses started using technology where they weren't before, that actually, some people were I know quite a few people that never actually went back to the job that they were furloughed from, because my point is, there's always going to be a cliff. You can prop that cliff up for as long as possible, but at some point, there's going to be a drop-off, right? At some point, and whether that's in jobs, whether that's in now with inflation, at some point there was going to be something that was affected by that propping, and that's where we are now. We propped up the world or the economy.
And low interest rates.
Yeah.
So with people and their increased mortgage costs, so they were kept at historical lows. People then were forced to buy houses with huge amounts of debt. they were forced into that. And that's another thing that the government always does, is always tries to prop up the housing market, keeping it overinflated, forcing people to take out more money than they probably should have, making people pay more money for houses that shouldn't be that expensive.
Yeah, I mean, I know that we tried to sell our house, I think it was towards the end of 2021, start of 2022, and we could get near enough what we wanted for ours, but when we were then looking at what we were going to buy, we were just really disappointed in the value of the stuff that we were looking, if in terms of how high it was. And you can say it's all relative, but it's not.
No, it's not.
And because people do say that to me, well, if you're selling and buying at the same time, it becomes all relative. And I'm like, it's not, because a 10% increase or 10% over price of a £200,000 house and a 10% increase of a £500,000 house, for example, is a bigger monetary, even though 10%.
I've had this exact same argument. It's surprising how many people don't see that.
Yeah, because I do understand that 10%. It's
good if you're downsizing.
Yeah.
But if you're going up.
If you're going up, it's a problem, yeah. Because we can all talk about percentages being the same in that 10% is 10%, and I get that. Yeah. But 10% on 200 grand is 20,000. 10% of 500 grand is 50,000, and finding 30,000 in the middle is a huge thing. Yeah. So yeah, and like you say, I'm in a lucky position right now where my mortgage is fixed until I think 2025. So I'm okay, and I'm hoping that by that point we're going to start to see some lower rates. But yeah, it's the interesting thing with the rates though is the government aren't necessarily in control of that, right? Because that's a Bank of England decision, right? And but what I find interesting about that is the government will always come out and back, even the opposition, they'll always back the Bank of England. And I find that really interesting because actually that's their opportunity to say, these guys got it wrong. And that doesn't mean that we hate them and we're never going to talk to them again. It just means they got it wrong.
You mean any opportunity to blame somebody else and they're not taking it?
Yeah. It's interesting though, isn't it? Yeah. I don't know if you've noticed that, but even the opposition will always back the Bank of England. Nobody seems to question the Bank of England. They just question government. And I know the Bank of England have just got to act on a situation that's been handed to them in a sense. But they've also got this wrong with the inflation piece. Their predictions were wrong.
It was transitory.
Well,
that was in America. They said. Did they say that over here as well?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
They were expecting a lower figure than we got in the end anyway, which is why they ended up going another 0.5.
Even the figures they give us aren't true, though, are they?
No, they're not the real.
I mean, when you look at trueflation, it's a lot higher. When they were saying that our inflation rate was 10%, trueflation was showing it was closer to 20%.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is mad in itself, isn't it?
Yeah.
And again, if they just came out with the real numbers, say nobody's going to care. I don't mean that how that sounds, but we are where we are, right? Inflation is where it is, and all we can do now is work to bringing it down. But just tell us the truth. Just tell us what the figure is.
I don't think that's going to work for them.
But it's not. It's not hard, is it? The issue, though, and this is an interesting one because we're talking now about a world where we don't get told the truth, but there are so many opportunities for people to now, kind of, I guess, talk about the truth, and it's harder and harder and harder for people to shut down the truth.
But they do, because they use that horrific term conspiracy theory, which I just think is so disingenuous. Yeah, anything that isn't served to you on a platter by the BBC, anything outside of that is a conspiracy theory. Even though, because everything that I write may seem a little bit out there, but it's all backed up by facts. It's all about, you can go and pick out everything that I've written and you can find the source.
And I guess that's the interesting thing is you would challenge people, I guess, to challenge you. You would challenge people to challenge the facts. And if they can find faults in your facts,
yeah, absolutely,
then fine. But like you say, they are facts and they are factually driven. But I guess my point is there's more and more platforms becoming available in order for people to be able to, for example, and again, we'll go back to Andrew Tate, he got deplatformed from YouTube and Twitter and whatnot.
I'm not comfortable with the fact he's been mentioned so many times during this conversation.
Yeah, sorry. But it's because it's a good example, right, of because he then went on that Rumble or whatever it is, right? My point is there are places where people can go now. There are places like Substack where you can write, and there's also I don't know if you know about Arweave, which is another crypto project, which is basically the perma web, if you like. So basically anything that goes on there is permanently tagged, if you like, in the blockchain. So you could find information, for example, that you see today, you could store it on the Arweave perma web, and nobody can delete that. So there was a lot of people at the start of the Ukraine war apparently data scraping for news articles and information to put them on the permaweb so that they couldn't be taken down anymore and changed or what have you. So my point is there are more and more ways now where we can go to other platforms or talk, like even opportunities like this.
Though, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And we're time poor, aren't we?
Yeah.
Because we have to work harder for less.
Yeah.
So since we got taken off the gold standard in 1971, the cost of living, I think, has risen by 12 times as per the last figures. I mean, obviously, it's a lot more since the recent
uplift
rise. But wages have only risen by 5 times. So people are working a lot harder for less. And now we need 2 people to go out to work to be able to afford the same things that we did back in the 80s. So we're all time poor.
Yeah. And also, I can understand to an extent people saying, why would I challenge the narrative when, like you say, I haven't got much time on my hands. I need to earn as much money as I can possibly earn to pay the bills, to do the things I want to do. I don't want to spend my time over here arguing with people about what's right or wrong. I just want to earn my money and go to bed. And, I don't agree with it, but I can get that.
The only thing I would say is it's not really about them. It's about their children.
The future.
If they have children, or the next generation. Because that's why I do everything that I do.
Yeah, it's not for you.
No, it's not for me. I'm just not keen on the future that I can see for our kids. And that terrifies me.
Yeah. And as a parent, the one thing you want to be able to do is protect your children. And when you're not here, you can't. But you can do as much as you can in your life to give them the best opportunity as possible. And
that is why I put all of my energy into just trying to make the world a little less shit.
No, I get that. We should have used that for the end, because that would have been a great ending. But I do want to touch on the Bitcoin mining piece quickly. So again, another narrative of the anti-crypto, anti-Bitcoin world is that Bitcoin mining is terrible for the environment, uses more energy than Norway or whatever they say, and that has to be stopped at all costs.
No, absolutely not. So actually, going back to 1971, when our money was backed by gold it takes a lot of energy to make gold. Depending on the grade, I think you could sometimes take up to 80 tons of rock just to make 1 ounce of gold. So that's a lot of time and energy that is being transferred into that item. So when we came off the gold standard and the cost of living rose exponentially, wages didn't increase, it was because we could just create money when we needed to. There was no cost to producing it. It wasn't backed by anything. So money needs to be connected to energy. There has to be a link to the real world in some way.
And therefore, the people that are creating it, there's a consequence to them of creating this. And by consequence, I mean, if the government prints money today, in principle, there's no consequence to them. They can do that. There's no cost. There's no, whatever. Let's say, for example, Boris Johnson printed the money. Rishi Sunak's dealing with the fallout. Boris Johnson doesn't have to deal with the fallout.
Short-termism, in our politics.
Whereas, like you say, if it was tied back to a real world cost or whatever, then actually they might think twice about doing it.
And I think we wouldn't always be going to war.
Because of the cost of doing it.
It would be financially prohibitive.
Yeah. But then I guess you could argue that then that question then, if we put it back to an environmental question, are you then torn? Not you, but an individual, are you then torn between what's right financially and for monetary policy, but then what's right for the environment?
So Bitcoin mining can actually help us become carbon negative.
Go for it.
So we can tap into stranded energy no matter where it is on the planet.
So energy that isn't being used,
that would otherwise be lost.
be wasted.
Yeah. Or so you could mine from hydro.
Yep.
You can mine from volcanoes.
Mm-hmm.
You can mine off landfill.
Mm-hmm.
We have enough methane in the UK coming off landfills to mine for the next 40 to 50 years.
My Bitcoin.
Well, it's energy.
Okay.
It's energy that they burn to create CO2 because it's a slightly less harmful gas. So rather than using the methane as an energy source, they burn it to create a less
so they get rid of
gas.
it basically.
Yeah. But the great thing with Bitcoin mining is you have these amazing containerized solutions where you can put them wherever the energy is.
But does this though again come back to, because if again I'm not, but if I was an environmentalist type person, right, I would say, well, that's all very well and good, but that relies on the people doing the mining to have the good intentions and the right intentions. Yeah, because it would be easier for me to rock up to a warehouse in London, you know, plug in my Bitcoin miner and just use whatever energy is provided to me.
It would be very expensive.
But my point is, if you've got these institutions that are currently using maybe less efficient, where's the incentive? Is it cost? Is it?
The incentive is that you need to find cheap stranded energy, because otherwise it's just not cost effective.
Yeah.
You just wouldn't do it. So it has to be. So Bitcoin mining is the buyer of last resort. When you've got nothing else to do with your energy, when the only thing that can happen is for you to either flare it or lose it, Bitcoin miners can come in. Last year, the National Grid had to pay 250 million, you know where I'm going with this, to curtail their wind because there was too much wind and it was overloading the grid. Bitcoin mining can switch over just within seconds. And yet when we try and bring this to governments, they're just not listening.
Because they don't understand it, because they don't want to. What do you think the...
I think that in part it comes down to that they think that Bitcoin and crypto are the same. They don't understand that, because I went to an event, and Lisa Cameron, who works, she was there. She's been working
Chair
on
of the APPG.
That's right, exactly. And one of the questions I asked her was, if Bitcoin has a dominance of 50% and these amazing ESG properties, why was nothing mentioned in the recent APPG report about Bitcoin? And she said that it was about, I don't know, grassroots, top down, bottom up, all this
political
all
talk
this stuff. And I'm sitting there thinking, yeah, okay, all right, but you do know that Bitcoin doesn't give a shit. Like, it will do its thing. You've got to get on board with Bitcoin. Bitcoin doesn't have to meet you anywhere.
In the middle.
Like, you have to get your head around it and understand how it can help us. I mean, I think that the whole ESG thing's a load of bullshit anyway. But if we're going to play that game, then it will help them with their targets.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And do you, so for a lot of people would say that Bitcoin mining isn't viable in the UK because they're looking at energy costs and things like that. But actually, are we saying that if, and maybe we should do this, if we could create an area where we could mine Bitcoin using things like the methane gas that's on landfills, we could actually mine Bitcoin for practically, I say nothing, obviously there would be a cost, but for a very small cost.
Well, something that's a problem that gets released into the atmosphere and causes methane. It has worse warming properties for the environment than CO2. That's why they burn it
into that.
But if you could get the excess energy that they curtail from wind farms, if you can get the methane from biogas. In Ireland, they're actually creating circular economies where there's a brilliant documentary called The Bitcoin Farmer.
Okay.
And they actually take the methane, the physical shit, and they put it into a generator, turn it into electricity, mine Bitcoin, which then goes back into the farm, and then the byproduct they spread on the land.
That's insane.
It's unbelievable, the ingenuity in this space and the problems that it can solve are mind-blowing.
Yeah, I mean, even that, I didn't know that. That particular part, and I will check that out.
I'll send you the link to the documentary. It's fascinating.
So look, I mean, we've been talking for, I think, best part of an hour, and I could carry on talking all day long, but just to leave it, I guess, at that point, what, like, I know it's a hard question to say, but again, we're going to give them a takeaway. Something that people can stay till the end and listen to all of this, and they're open to listening, and they're open to learning more. What would be your key kind of takeaway for someone?
Please study Bitcoin.
Fine. Those words are all that's needed. Thank you very much, Susie. I've really enjoyed our chat today.
Thank you for having me.
And for those that are listening, if you want to get in touch with Susie, how can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at @decentrasuze.
Yeah.
Do I have to spell it?
No, we'll link it. Okay. And you've got a column in CityAM in the London Press, and hopefully in the not too distant future, a bit more widespread news coverage as well.
Let's hope so. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Thank you, Susie.
Thank you.